You've read that right. This is the only video you need to score 100th percentile on the medical college admission test. My name's Andy, a medical student at Dalhousie Medical School and a 524 MCAT scorer. I've watched hundreds of MCAT guides on YouTube. Picking out their best information and consolidating that with my own experience, I've made a 4-stage systematic guide with one bonus stage that I would follow if I were to take it again. But good thing I don't have to, and neither will you after watching this video all the way through. In each chapter of the video, I will show you every resource that I have personally used, which are conveniently compiled in a Google Doc linked in the description. And I will also include non-academic tips, which have helped me achieve my dream score. As frankly, the MCAT or every other test you will take along your physician journey do not exist in a vacuum. And so many seemingly unrelated factors contribute to your performance. This is an aspect most other guides leave out, but keeping my promise that this is the only video you will need, I have made sure to include it. So let's get started. Since 2015, with the exception of the COVID year, the MCAT is roughly a 7.5-hour exam composed of 4 content sections. The first section is the chemical and physical foundations of biological systems. The second section is critical analysis and reasoning skills. The third section is biological and biochemical foundations of living systems. And the last section is the physical, social, and biological foundations of behavior. I will now refer to them as ChemPhys, CARS, BioBiochem, and PsychSoc from now on. You have 95 minutes to complete ChemPhys, BioBiochem, and PsychSoc, each with 59 questions. The CARS section is 90 minutes and 53 questions. You get an optional break between each section, the first and last break being 10 minutes, and the mid-exam break is 30 minutes. You also have an optional tutorial at the very start and an optional survey at the very end. As their name suggests, the first section is testing you on your chemistry, your physics or organic chemistry. The second section is a reading comprehension section. The third section is testing your biology and biochemistry, and the last section is testing your psychology and sociology. The AAMC, which is the association that makes the MCAT, has a thick document detailing the specific topics, but I suggest you leave reading that to after stage 2. During the exam, you will also be given laminated sheets with a marker to take notes and perform calculations. I've linked something similar in the description. Non-academic tip number 1. As you know, the MCAT is a long exam, requiring extended periods of focus, which makes sense. If you want to be a surgeon, for example, you would have to focus for hours at a time performing a surgery. Fortunately, focus and attention can be trained. Start looking for opportunities in your life where you can practice being attentive for longer periods of time. Of course, it can be having longer study sessions, but it can even be something simple, like watching this video all the way until the end without being distracted, which is harder than you would imagine. You know, these billion-dollar companies like Instagram and TikTok are built on stealing your attention from what matters. I know it's hard to not click away and watch these, frankly, more entertaining videos, but you can do it. How much time to dedicate to studying for this test is completely dependent on you, as everyone has different schedules, differing amounts of pre-existing knowledge, and how many hours you can work per day without being burnt out. The general rule of thumb is 3 months of full-time study, or about 400 hours of study time. And that is also around how much time I have dedicated on my exam. There are students who have done incredibly well studying only part-time, and there are also students who needed over 500 hours to achieve a decent score. There is no perfect study plan that fits everyone, and in this video, I will also not prescribe a set-in-stone plan for you to follow. But I will instead divide the stages as a percentage of your total allotted time, so that you can pick a schedule that works for you, but still use an optimized and efficient strategy to get the most out of your studying time. Does that sound good? Great. Okay, moving on to the first stage. Develop a strong background. This stage takes place before your dedicated MCAT study timeline and start as early as possible. If you're currently in high school, Congratulations on discovering this video so early. It's a great opportunity to get ahead by taking advanced courses in subjects covered on the MCAT, such as physics, chemistry, biology, psychology. I have to admit, taking AP Physics 1 and 2 in grade 12 significantly made the Chem Phys section less scary. But I recognize that most viewers are in college. Similarly, you should ideally pick courses that an MCAT will test you on. Additionally, take courses that deal with analyzing research papers. Because, as I will explain later, the MCAT is not merely memorization. It also emphasizes data analysis. Since I knew I wanted to take the MCAT after my second year of undergrad, I specifically picked a third-year course with reading and understanding research articles as a core component. This caused my college schedule to be a bit messed up, but it was 100% worth it. If you're unable to take such courses, you can read research articles on your own, trying to understand the figures and the results, and then you can use ChatGPT to explain them to you if you don't understand. I began researching the MCAT towards the end of high school. From my research, I realized I would struggle with the infamous CARS section. As an immigrant and not being an avid reader, I recognized that my reading comprehension needed to be improved. Luckily, I caught this problem early, since reading comprehension takes the most amount of time to improve out of all these sections. I started to practice CARS questions almost 2 years before my test day. This may seem a bit crazy, but man, I gotta tell you, I knew I really was not good at reading. And I improved a lot over these 2 years. For the MCAT, it is important that you discover your weakest link and to tackle it early. One of your ways to discover your weakness is to do the MCAT question of the day. There are a few websites that offer this, and I try to do these short questions every day. You don't have to do them every day. The point of these questions is not necessarily to learn the content, but to get a better understanding of what might be tested. And they were honestly kind of fun to do. In case anyone has told you otherwise, I want to make it clear that it is never too early to prepare for the MCAT. If you happen to click on this video later in your MCAT prep, no worries. We can still get a top percentile score by optimizing the next few stages. Stage 2 is to learn and review content. Many MCAT guides will call this just content review, but I don't think that's very inclusive for students who may not have a strong background. And even for me, having taken all those MCAT courses, only about 70% of the content I have even heard about before. So this stage is mainly focused on reviewing the content you already seen and learning the gaps in content knowledge. This stage should take at least 30, but no more than 40% of your total dedicated studying time, depending on your background knowledge level. There are two main players in the MCAT comprehensive content textbook market. You have Kaplan and you have Princeton Review. They both have a collection of books covering the different topics of the MCAT. I personally have used Kaplan, but I have also read parts of the Princeton Review from my friend. I may be biased when I say this, so take it with a grain of salt, but I have found that Kaplan is more straightforward and the formatting is a bit more pleasing than Princeton Review. And I found that the Princeton Review goes into more detail, which you may prefer or you may not. Nevertheless, either of these book series will be good enough as the workhorse of this stage. How you decide to go through these books is completely up to you. You can either finish one book at a time or jump between the different subject books. I personally jump between the books just based on what topic I wanted to learn at that specific time. But whichever way you choose, it is important that you track your progress. This is especially important in this stage as there is so much content to cover and it is easy to fall behind. What I did was I added up all the stages of the Kaplan books, subtracted the fluff like the intro or like the glossary, and then I put it into a spreadsheet. I then entered the number of days left in this stage, and I made a column for the pages I've already reviewed, which I will update every day, plus a formula that automatically calculates how many pages of content I need to get through per day to stay on track. What I like about this system is that it will adjust how many pages you need to read per day if you, let's say, miss a day of studying. When you're going through the Kaplan books or lurking in the MCAT subreddit, you may come across terms like high yield and low yield. These terms indicate the relative chance of a certain topic appearing on the actual exam. As a soon-to-be 100th percentile scorer, that's you I'm talking about, you should be very careful about these terms. Low yield does not mean you shouldn't learn it. This is how I think of it. On the actual MCAT, it will be very likely, almost certain, that there will be low yield information, right? This is what filters the mediocre MCAT takers and the 520 plus MCAT takers such as yourself. So, low yield is actually highly yielded on the MCAT if you think about it in this way. A word of caution though, if you expand your low yield knowledge too much, it might take away from your study time to grasp other higher yield topics. So be selective of your low yield knowledge and balance this learning in accordance with your allotted study time. Okay, great. We're now on track to finish reading the content books. But how will you remember the information you read months later? As you will learn in the Psych-Soc section, passive reading is not an efficient memory encoding technique. My approach to learning and remembering information boils down to three main concepts: understanding, active recall, and spaced repetition. This is something I still use in medical school, and it is something that you can apply to your academic career at any point, not just for the MCAT. How this works is, when I first read the material, my goal is to understand conceptually what it means and not worry too much about remembering the concept. For example, if I read that glutamic acid turns into glutamate in high pH, my goal isn't to memorize that verbatim, but to think through why that occurs. Okay, high pH means basic, which means low proton concentration, and this causes the protons from the glutamic acid side chains to dissociate into the solution, right? That makes sense. If I didn't, I would use ChatGPT to explain it to me. On a side note, I did not have ChatGPT when I studied for the MCAT, but it would have been so helpful. Another great resource you can use as a MCAT student is the wonderful playlist on YouTube by Khan Academy and AAMC. I wouldn't watch all the videos as it would take a lot of time on top of reading all these books, but I would absolutely watch specific topics that you struggle with. Okay, now for active recall. It is the process of trying to remember something. Practically speaking, it is testing yourself. And then spaced repetition is when you review information at increasing intervals of time. For example, you review the pH effects of amino acid protonation after 1 day, then after 3 days, then after a week, and so on and so forth. Active recall and spaced repetition are scientifically proven to be two of the best learning strategies. Lucky for you, and for me, and for countless other medical students, there is a free app that enables you to utilize both of these techniques. It is called Anki. It is essentially a flashcard app that has spaced repetition baked in. Let me know in the comments if you would like me to do a video on how I use Anki to learn everything in medical school. But for the purposes of this video, all you need to know is that Anki is a flashcard app that I strongly recommend you try using. Going back to our example, I will make a card like, how would high or low pH affect amino acid protonation? And then the answer would just be explaining that. The other great thing about Anki is that it has a mobile and iPad app. There are so many pieces of time throughout your day that you can exploit as study time. When you're waiting in line at the groceries, when you're on the bus or carpooling, in between sets in the gym, or when you're taking a pull out your phone and do a few cards. It is surprising how much studying time you can juice out of your day if you can take advantage of these non-traditional or unscheduled study times. Depending on how many cards you have to make and how much time you can extract, you may have to set aside some time to rip through some cards during and after your content learning stage, all the way up until your test day. I remember I finished reviewing my Anki deck during breakfast of my test day. I wouldn't recommend you cut it so close, but hey, it worked out. Speaking of going to the gym, here comes academic tip number 2. Physical activity correlates highly with mental performance. There are mountains of studies in support of this, and you're more than welcome to research this on your own. In other words, source, trust me, bro. When planning out your MCAT study schedule, be sure to leave in some time for physical activity. And the great news is, it doesn't have to be vigorous exercise. Just going out for a walk can improve memory as well as improve your mood. Not many things during MCAT prep is easy, but this is literally a walk in the park. If you want to be extra efficient, you can do Anki cards when you're exercising. I use my iPad and a remote while walking on the treadmill. Feel free to copy the setup if you like. And I will also link this Anki remote in the video description. There are two other documents that I have used in supplement to the Kaplan books. The first is a comprehensive document of equations that I have stolen online and added stuff to it. If you are going to use this document as well, I would suggest you look through and put the ones you don't know into Anki. The second document explains the various lab techniques that may appear on the MCAT. It is relatively short and sweet, and I highly recommend knowing these inside out. The idea of content learning doesn't really make sense for cars. Yes, AMC states that cars will pull passages from humanities, social sciences, and architecture, art, or economics, but they will never test about these topics on the cars section. Only comprehension of the passage. Feel free to read the cars book included in the Kaplan book set, but it is more important to just start practicing. One of the best cars resources is Jack Weston. They have daily cars passages as well as cars practice exams. Students have said Jack Weston cars is the most representative of AMC cars logic, and I would probably agree. Of course, other than the official AMC cars practice passages. Speaking of Jack Weston, funny story. I pointed out a few mistakes on their website, and their team replied with a job offer. I declined, but if this whole YouTube thing doesn't work out, then maybe I will regret that. So it would mean the world to me if you are able to click the like button or the dislike button. And please let me know in the comments what you would like me to do a video on next, so I can make the best content that serves your needs. Thank you. With cars, there are three main challenges: accuracy, speed, and stamina. We can tackle these systematically, starting with accuracy. When you first start doing cars practice, ignore the timing. There's no point in answering questions fast if they are wrong. Step one is to focus on reading, understanding, and picking up patterns from these passages and aim for at least 80% accuracy. Once you can do 5 passages individually with 80+% accuracy, move on to try to get that down to 10 minutes per passage. Once you can do that, progressively overload stamina by doing passages in a row while maintaining accuracy and speed. Start with 3 in a row, then 6 in a row, and finally 9 in a row. The goal you want to get to is that you can do 9 passages in a row with 95% plus accuracy with 9 minutes per passage. This goal sounds super difficult at first, and it is, but with practice and perseverance, we all can do it. The other challenge with cars is that it does not necessarily have a standard way of doing its passages like the other sections, which I will cover in the next stage. You have to try out different strategies and find which works best for you. Some people summarize each paragraph, some people highlight, some people even read the questions first. Some people spend more time on reading than the questions, and some people do the opposite. And it works for them, but it doesn't mean it will work for you. Unlike other companies trying to sell you something, I won't exactly prescribe a specific secret way of tackling cars passages that will guarantee to get you 100th percentile. It doesn't exist. I encourage you to start cars practice early so that you can identify the strategies that work for you or build a strategy that works for you. And then practice using this strategy. The only strategy I would suggest, and this will fit into whichever way you decide to tackle the passages, is the notion of the main idea. When you're reading, actively try to build this main idea with every sentence you read. Try to understand the purpose behind why the author has written this passage and what is their thesis or main idea. Then, when you go to answer the questions, try to answer it based on what the main idea is. I found that most of the questions I got wrong during my practice were because I did not grasp the main idea or I did not relate the answer choice to the main idea. Non-academic tip number 3 is somewhat related to cars. When I first started practicing cars, I was getting only 3 out of 6 or 2 out of 6 questions right on passages. I thought, it's over for me. I'm just bad at reading comprehension. This idea of me, Andy Jin, being bad at reading was made into my identity, especially since I was never good at reading, and I believed it. It wasn't until I read Mindset by Carl Dweck that I realized this mentality was actually holding me back, and I can change the self-imposed identity of being bad at cars. Instead of telling myself I'm just bad at it, I began telling myself I can improve on it. The simple shift from a fixed mindset into a growth mindset unlocked my mind to do the learning that would eventually satisfy my newfound identity of someone who constantly improves on cars. Although I didn't get 100th percentile on cars, that is a hell of a lot better than where I was stuck with my fixed mindset. The car section may include difficult vocabulary and even words in other languages, but the AMC doesn't expect you to know them outright. They're designed to be understood through context. If your vocabulary is weak, focus on practicing more cars passages to pick up key terms the AMC expects you to know. For instance, I did not know the word folly, which appeared in a question stem. And although I could have inferred its meaning, knowing it would have been very helpful. If you haven't already, it would be good to do a practice test during this stage. But please, please, please don't use a full-length test from the AMC. Those are the best material to practice with and should be saved until the very end. A free test from whichever test company would suffice, even a half-length diagnostic test. The goal of doing this is to get a sense of the passages and questions, the structure, and the timing of the test. And don't be afraid to get a bad score on the first practice test. I did my first with the Princeton Review and got 496. But from that experience, I got a good mental picture of what the MCAT is and realized how much I still have to improve, which really motivated me to pull up my socks. An approach I've seen some students take is to take their first actual MCAT as their practice test. Or they go into their first actual MCAT thinking, it's okay if I don't do well on this, I can just take it again. I would encourage students to not have this mindset, as it is most efficient and most effective to do your best on your first and hopefully only attempt. Not only will it save you money and a lot of time, it also creates challenges when you're preparing for your second attempt, but you've already used up all your resources from the AMC, and you're left practicing with unrepresentative material from third-party companies. If this is your first time taking the MCAT, treat it as if it is your only attempt. If you have already taken the MCAT, keep watching. You can still utilize the strategies I will share in the next stages. If you have made it this far into the video, thank you. As your reward, I have made a free tool that keeps you accountable and on track every step of the way, including a study calendar, study time, and content trackers, as well as a test score tracker. As Peter Drucker has stated, you can't improve what you don't measure. This is a bit exaggerated, but the idea behind it is that measuring and tracking your performance is fundamental to improvement. Link in the description if you're interested in tracking and improving your MCAT score. Congratulations on completing stage 2. In my opinion, that was the hardest, most boring stage of my MCAT prep. I would say I enjoy learning the different topics, but deep inside, I think I'm just gaslighting myself. In the next stage, you finally get to apply your knowledge to solve problems. And that is pretty much the first principles of medicine: to obtain knowledge and to apply your knowledge to solve the patient's problems. Stage 3 is practice content, which is further split up into non-AMC and official AMC. Saving the official AMC material towards the end is especially important for cars, since they are the people who actually make your test, and the logic behind answer choices is slightly different. Your brain is amazing for picking up patterns and extracting subtleties that you may not consciously realize. So, to optimally train your brain for the real deal, learn with the third-party material at first, and then apply your learning to the AMC material. You should aim to spend the majority of your time in stage 3 at around 40%. This is a stage that transitions you from a remember and recall machine to an analysis and knowledge synthesis machine. It is where you will learn how to do actual MCAT questions, which is the whole point of this game. The best resource for practicing content apart from the AMC material is UWorld. It is a bit pricey, but absolutely worth it. But their cars questions aren't as good as Jack Weston, so you can choose to leave them out. I found that for the psych-soc section, the best practice strategy is volume. The more theories and concepts you're exposed to and know the different ways they are applied, the better your test score. And thus, it is one of the easiest sections to increase your score in. Along with the UWorld questions, I suggest also doing the psych-soc passages on Jack Weston, as well as Khan Academy, both linked below. As you transition into the official AMC material, there's a Chrome browser extension that you can install to display these questions in a realistic testing user interface. I'd recommend it as it will allow you to become familiar with how the test will look on test day. I've also linked this in the video description. I've already talked about cars in the previous stage, so continue practicing and improving your cars slowly and steadily as discussed. The 3 other sections are more straightforward, thankfully. Unlike the car section, where there's really one question type, there are 3 different question types on the science sections. There are passage questions, which ask you a question that needs information from the passage to answer, which is analogous to the cars type questions. Then there are discrete questions, which do not have an associated passage and are purely testing your knowledge. Then there are pseudo-discrete questions that appear with a passage and may seem like it requires information from the passage, but it actually doesn't. Man, it's almost like tricking students is their full-time job. Anyway, unlike cars where there are multiple good strategies, there really is only one optimal strategy for the science sections. And instead of just talking about it, why don't we jump in and actually do one? This is a biochem passage taken from Khan Academy. Thank you, Sal Khan. We love you. As we read through the passage, we want to pick up on terms we recognize from studying, and then try to figure out the relationships between things mentioned in the passage. Then, after each paragraph, we want to quickly summarize using shorthands that we've developed ourselves, as well as diagrams. Autosomal dominant hyper IgE syndrome, ADHES, a severe immunodeficiency disorder, is caused by a heterozygous mutation in the gene encoding for the transcription factor, signal transducer, and activator of transcription 3. We know what heterozygous means. In healthy individuals, STAT3 resides in the cytoplasm and is phosphorylated by receptors in the cell membrane after binding of extracellular cytokines. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, let's simplify things. So it says that a decrease in STAT3 leads to this condition called ADHES. And it also says that STAT3 resides in the cytoplasm and is phosphorylated by receptors in the cell membrane. So we can draw that as a diagram. So let's say this is the cell. That's our membrane receptor. We got our cytokines, which then phosphorylates STAT3. Draw a little P there for phosphorylation. The resulting activated protein, known as phospho-STAT3, binds a second phospho-STAT3 protein, and the resulting 2-protein complex, referred to as a homodimer, acts to initiate the transcription of many different genes, including the transcription factor retinoic acid-related orphan receptor gamma T, or ROR gamma T. ROR gamma T controls important steps in the maturation process of T cells, and mutations affecting the STAT3 gene associated with ADHES manifest themselves in reduced populations of functional T cells. All right, so we can now add to this diagram, this cute little diagram we've drawn. So we know that it is a dimer, and then this then goes to activate ROR gamma T, or activate the transcription of ROR gamma T, which we know is occurring in the nucleus, so we can draw a little nucleus. And then this leads to T cell maturation. In order to better understand the relationship between the transcription of STAT3 and ROR gamma T in ADHES, researchers used a quantitative polymerase chain reaction assay to measure non-mutated STAT3 and ROR gamma T messenger RNA, or mRNA levels in T cells derived from adhese patients. When we get to a figure, we don't have to spend time completely understanding it. There will be some super complex figures on your test, and you likely won't need to understand every detail to be able to answer the questions. All you need from a figure is what the dependent and independent variables are, and the patterns or results of the figure. Then, if a question prompts us to use the information from a figure, we can go back and look more in depth. So reading the figure title, Figure 1, STAT3 and ROR gamma T mRNA levels in T cells of adhese patients and in healthy individuals, control, measured in relative units. In this case, we find the independent variable to be STAT3, ROR gamma T, and whether they are adhese patients or control patients. The dependent variable would be the mRNA levels of either STAT3 or ROR gamma T. And we see that in the adhese patients, both the STAT3 and ROR gamma T have decreased levels of mRNA. When assessing the answer choices, we want to read each option and convince ourselves why one of them is right and why the others are wrong. In other words, we need to have a reason for picking one answer and not picking the other answers. Question 1 is, according to the passage, which is not a condition that would reduce ROR gamma T expression or activity in a T cell? Answer A is mutation of a nuclear localization signal on STAT3. We know it's not A because, unless stated otherwise, a mutation means a decrease in function. And for it to work as a transcription factor, it needs to be localized to the nucleus. So we can rule this guy out. Answer choice B is loss of kinase activity of STAT3. We know from the passage STAT3 gets phosphorylated, but doesn't phosphorylate other things, so it's not a kinase. And thus, this option would not be a condition that will reduce ROR gamma T, and this seems to be our best answer so far, but let's keep going. Answer C says reduce STAT3 dimerization. From the passage, we see that STAT3 needs to be dimerized to be activated. So it would make sense that this would reduce ROR gamma T expression. Lastly, D says reduced STAT3 phosphorylation. Along similar lines as C, this would mean STAT3 is not activated and therefore ROR gamma T will not be expressed. Question 2 asks, what is the best explanation for the difference in STAT3 levels in the adhese group versus control? From a quick glance, we can see that the answer choices are between a mutation of either STAT3 or ROR gamma T, and whether the gene is on one chromosome or both chromosomes. We can quickly rule out answers C and D because in the passage, it states quite clearly that it is a mutation of the STAT3 that causes adhese. And conveniently, we've also wrote down this relationship. So cross these two out. Then we have to figure out whether it's on one or both chromosomes. If you recall, the passage says that it is a heterozygous mutation, which means that it is only on one chromosome. If it was on both chromosomes, then it will be a homozygous mutation. So we can confidently say that it is A and move on to the next question. An important mechanism by which mutations in protein complexes can cause disease is the so-called dominant negative effect. This is observed in proteins that assemble into symmetric homomeric or heteromeric complexes if one mutated subunit can block the function of the wild-type subunits, thus causing a disproportionate loss of function. Assuming that the STAT3 mutation exhibits a dominant negative effect, what percentage of biologically active STAT3 homodimers would one expect to find in cells of adhese patients compared to healthy individuals? Is it A, 100%, B, 75, 50, or 25%? This one's a bit tricky to think about. We know from the passage that adhese cells have half the number of non-mutated STAT3, and we can confirm this by going back to our figure and seeing that indeed it is about 50%. Okay, now let's think about what can happen. Okay, so within the stat 3 population, we have either a good or a bad subunit. And we know that they are both 50%. And when they assemble into a homodimer, we can either have two good, one good and one bad and one good, or two bads. And each of these have a 25% chance of occurring, which adds to 100%. From the knowledge gained from the question stem, we know that only this guy will work, as these three would be non-functional due to the bad subunit. And from thinking it through, we can confidently say that it is 25%. All right, moving on to the next question. What distinguishes transcription factors like STAT3 from other gene regulatory proteins? Is it A, transcription factors reside permanently in the cell nucleus? Other gene regulatory proteins translocate to the nucleus from the cytoplasm. From content review, we should know that transcription factors are proteins that move to the nucleus to bind DNA, but doesn't necessarily have to reside there. And even if we didn't know that, we can also see that STAT3 resides in the cytoplasm from the passage, right here. So this would make answer choice A wrong. Answer choice B says, transcription factors function only in activating transcription of a gene. Other gene regulatory proteins function only in repressing transcription of a gene. Transcription factors can either turn on or off genes, and other regulatory elements like enhancers and silencers can also either activate or repress a gene. So this one is incorrect. Answer choice C says transcription factors cannot bind directly to DNA. Some other gene regulatory proteins are able to bind directly to DNA. And then answer D is the opposite of that. So from content review, we should know that transcription factors do bind directly to DNA, and many other regulatory proteins do not. This question is an example of a pseudo-discrete question because we don't really need any info from the passage. So we can pick D and move on. Question 5 asks, which of the following STAT3 mutations is most likely not to reduce mRNA levels of ROR gamma T? Answer A is triple nucleotide deletion in the STAT3 DNA binding domain. B is triple nucleotide deletion in a STAT3 intron corresponding region. C is double nucleotide deletion in a STAT3 intron corresponding region. And D is single nucleotide deletion affecting the STAT3 promoter. From content review, we should know that deletions of nucleotides in anything other than multiples of 3 will result in what's called a frameshift mutation, causing the entire subsequent protein to be messed up. So from this, we can eliminate C and D. Then we can choose B because we know that the introns are going to be spliced out anyways. And deleting amino acids in the DNA binding region or binding domain would probably cause problems with DNA binding, and thus the function of STAT3. The MCAT will put content that you are not expected to know to throw off unsuspecting test takers. For example, I did not know what STAT3 or ROR gamma T was, but we didn't need to know these beforehand to be able to answer the questions. And like what you've been doing with cars, you want to progressively overload to increase your stamina, working all the way up to doing 59 questions in a row without being distracted. Once you have achieved that, you can also start studying in the same time blocks as the actual exam. So 95 minutes followed by a break, and then 95 minutes again, and a break, and 95 minutes again. This is to get your brain used to staying focused for long periods of time, doing hard problems without constantly being fed dopamine from your phone or other distractions. Another way to progressively overload is to increase your speed, given that you maintain your accuracy. So aim to finish the 59 questions in 95 minutes or under. I did not find that doing full-length practice tests helped me that much during the practice content stage. I felt that apart from somewhat training my stamina and helping me work on timing, it did not help stimulate as much learning as the practice problems, where I could have instant feedback on mistakes and simultaneously add lapses in knowledge onto Anki. I know other students who have done incredibly well do practice tests before finishing practice content. So if you choose to do that, just make sure you're saving the official AMC tests until the next stage. As you may have already guessed, the next stage is practice tests. Before getting started with this stage and the inevitable difficulties that it may bring you, just take a minute to reflect on how far you've come already. 12 years of school, more years of college, the thick MCAT books that you thought would never be finished. You've done it all. That's amazing. Don't ever discount your hard work in the past, but use that as irrefutable evidence that you can tackle any challenges that are to come your way. Okay, enough talking, let's get to work. The remainder of your study time should be spent on this stage. At minimum, you should leave enough time to do 5 full-length tests. This may be less than 2 weeks for some students, or more than 4 weeks for others. The main objectives of this stage are as follows. 1. Be comfortable with staying focused for 7 hours, with no idea how you've done in the previous sections, and to keep performing at peak level. 2. Learn to manage your time during each of these sections, and recognize when to speed up, slow down, flag questions, and go back to the flagged questions. 3. Become used to testing conditions so that your actual test would just feel like another practice test. And lastly, number 4, catch any stray content knowledge gaps and to learn and review why you got questions wrong, but also reinforce why you got questions right. The resources to be used at this stage are the official AMC full-length tests, as well as a few third-party full-length tests. I would suggest you do the official AMC sample test first. I would agree with others who have taken the test that the score is a bit inflated and that the cars section was a bit too easy. This is not necessarily bad because it will increase your confidence and it is a nice way to ease into other full-length tests. You will only get a raw score for this section and not a scaled score from 472 to 528. There are converters online, but I would use a few just to take an average. Just know they are not super accurate. One tip for exam time management is to keep track of your per passage time usage and the midpoint time usage. The per passage time usage is to nudge you to slow down or speed up, and the midpoint is to ensure you are on track to finish the section. For example, if I see that it only took me 7 minutes to finish a cars passage, I know I have a bit of extra leeway for the next passage. If I only have 4 passages done and I see that I've already reached half of my time, I really need to pick up the pace so I can have enough time to give good answers for the last passages. These full-length tests will take over 7 hours each, especially if you take the allotted breaks, which you should. My brain was usually fried after, so feel free to take the rest of the day off. Once you are ready, you should review your test in detail, meaning every question and every answer choice. When you get a question right, retrace your thinking and reinforce the logic flow that got you there. And make sure you didn't just guess it right. For the questions you got wrong, but you thought you got right, again, retrace your thinking, but this time understand where it was flawed and how to avoid this in the future. For the questions you got wrong and you knew got wrong, this usually indicates a content knowledge gap in the science sections and having missed details in the cars passages. For this case, add in the knowledge gap into Anki and reread the cars passages again to see if you can get to the right answer. For the following full lengths, and depending on how much time you have, do a mix of third-party and official AMC tests. If you only have enough time to do the AMC tests, then just stick to that. Out of all the third-party tests, I found that Blueprint seems to be the most representative. Kaplan and TPR, or the Princeton Review, are typically too detailed and science-heavy, and really none of the parties quite capture the same logic as the AMC cars. But please shop around to see which you believe is the best. When you do your review of the car sections on third-party tests, just take the explanations with a grain of salt, and know that it is not very representative of the actual test. I remember getting like 122 or something like that on a Blueprint car section, but 130 on the real test. So please don't be discouraged by these scores. The scores you should be caring about are the official AAMC full lengths, as they are around what you should expect to get on your actual test. I have fortunately gotten a higher score on my actual test, not to brag or anything, and I think it is because of the actions I've taken in the bonus stage. So stay tuned for that. The practice test stage is easily the most difficult. You have to put all your knowledge to use and stress test your focus, your perseverance, and stamina for days on end. Non-academic tip number 4 will be a thought exercise. Okay. Imagine you are a patient with a complicated illness that would require a lot of attention and care over a long period of time. You have a choice between a doctor who may have passed medical school but put in minimal effort and has an aversion to challenge, or a doctor who has overcome challenges time and time again, really embrace the adversity and come through hard times. I think your choice as the patient is obvious. Now, thinking back to your current self, nobody said this was going to be easy. In fact, they probably said it was hard. And you also knew that. Grinding out 7-hour exams time and time again. This is what hard feels like. It is okay to feel challenged. Lean into it. Really embrace the adversity, as you will become a better physician as a result. Pinky promise. The final stage is test-taking skills. I call it a bonus stage because it fits into multiple places on the timeline. I've already mentioned a few, like building your stamina, your time management, and your understanding of the test format. But here, I will let you know other essential MCAT taking skills that you don't want to overlook. Like I've mentioned before, I have gotten my personal best test score on my actual MCAT than every other practice test I've taken. I could be biased when I say this, but I think it is because I had an edge on test-taking skills compared to other MCAT takers, who may not have realized the importance of these skills and unfortunately missed out on this video. But before I tell you the strategies that will bring your score into the 100th percentile, I have an offer. Having been an academic tutor for 3 years, I have helped countless students overcome challenges and achieve their medical school dream. Whether you're in high school trying to get a 5 on an AP exam, or preparing for the MCAT, or preparing for interviews next week, I am able to help elevate you to the next level and stand out as an applicant. I have so much confidence in your abilities that if you were not accepted to medical school, I will refund 100% of the costs. And if I go homeless from missing my rent payment after refunding you, then that isn't your fault. It's mine. I should have done a better job. Anyway, if you have found value in the content so far, scan the QR code or click the link in the description to begin your fast track to becoming a physician. There are countless books, podcasts, YouTube videos, TikToks, Instagram Reels, talking about the concept and power of visualization. It is the practice of imagining yourself doing something, anything, and imagining a good outcome. The more accurate, detailed, and vivid the imagination, and the more often you practice visualization, the more likely it is for the good outcome to come true. I won't go into the details for the sake of time, but if I'm not convincing enough, feel free to do your own research into it. Some books I recommend are Creative Visualization by Shakti Gawain, Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, who is actually a plastic surgeon, and the infamous Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I've come across this concept in athletics quite frequently, actually. Coaches would tell athletes to visualize making the play in their mind, or stepping into the ring, or scoring the goal. But I haven't seen this practice as much in academia, even though it is just as applicable. You can incorporate the power of visualization by imagining in detail the day of the test, reading the passages, picking the answers you know are correct, and seeing your desired score on score release day. Visualize the night before or the morning of a study day. Think about what you will achieve on this day and think about using what you will learn today on the actual exam. As a medic serving in the Canadian Armed Forces, I have been exposed to various interesting catchphrases, and one of them stuck with me. One that is also applicable to taking the MCAT. Train like you fight. You want to simulate your practice as close to the actual test as you can, down to every last detail. Some examples being, take the same breaks and have the same snacks during the breaks. For Mac users, use the Windows keyboard layout for the keyboard shortcuts because that is likely what the test centers will be using. Use the same noise-canceling headphones as your test center, do your hair up in the same way, and even dress in same clothes. Along the same vein, start adopting the same routine as your test day. Your mind and body love routines. And that is also why sports teams traveling far outside their time zones will often perform worse than home games. My test started at 8 a.m., so I began to get up at 6 a.m. every day, weeks in advance, to allow my body to get used to this routine. I also, unfortunately, had to cut out caffeine, as it made me have to use the washroom during the test. But fortunately, my body was able to adapt to perform without the caffeine after the acclimatization period. A few days leading up to the exam, I would also start eating the same foods at the same times so my GI tract can be in the same routine as well. It might seem that these actions are trivial, but if doing them will increase your score by just 1 point, it will be the difference between 99 and 100th percentile, increasing your score by thousands of test takers. Allow me to tell your story. Team Sky, a professional cycling team, had never won the Tour de France until they adopted the marginal gain philosophy, which optimized for seemingly trivial things. The team had custom-made mattresses that traveled with them to sleep on, regardless of the hotel. They also used special laundry detergent to reduce the chance of irritation during the ride, and previewed the terrain of which they will be riding on. Learning from Team Sky, it wouldn't be a bad idea to preview your test center, their washrooms, the temperature inside, and even what monitors they use. If you're like me and countless other students, you deal with a certain degree of test anxiety. Depending on how well managed it is, anxiety about performing less than ideal may become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It is often difficult to avoid anxiety outright. Along with increasing confidence by continued practice, there is another trick you can use if you ever experience anxiety or nervousness for the MCAT, other exams, or pretty much any other anxiety-provoking events. As it turns out, the physiologic response of anxiety, the shaky hands, the increased heart rate, the sweating, is identical to the state of excitedness. If you happen to notice these symptoms, try thinking, I am excited for this exam. This is called emotion reappraisal, a topic you may come across during your psych-soc content review. And I know it's almost like gaslighting yourself, but hey, gaslighting is effective. This also reminds me of a theory called the stress mindset theory. It states that individuals hold one of two mindsets. The stress is enhancing mindset, which believes that stress can lead to growth, learning, and improved performance. And the stress is debilitating mindset, which believes the opposite. The mindset of the individual determines how the stress affects them. The study also demonstrated that stress mindsets can be altered, which is such great news for us. When taught the benefits of stress, such as the enhanced focus, the motivation, people actually started experiencing these positive effects. One last suggestion you can try out is to save a passage from UWorld until the morning of your exam. Imagine the first passage your brain sees is this thick, perplexing, disgusting ChemPhys passage on your actual exam. I think my brain would just give up at that point. And the AMC knows this too, to weed out the weak. But having primed my brain already with a passage before, it was more willing to accept these difficult passages on the actual test. This is just your personal preference though, so your mileage may vary. To recap some important points, begin studying as soon as possible. Yes, even right after watching this video. Figure out how much time you have to study for the exam, full-time or part-time, then fill in the study calendar with the various stages. First, learn the content. Then, practice using your content knowledge to solve passage-based problems. Then, do practice tests until you feel comfortable with the average score you have achieved as if it was your actual MCAT score. Make sure you simulate the conditions as best as you can to give yourself every edge in comparison to other students. If you have taken notes throughout the video, look at you go. But don't worry if you haven't. You can always come back to the video and skip to the parts you want to review. Andy Jin is always here for you. And since I love you so much, I have made a PDF summary of everything I talked about. As always, I have linked it in the description below. While you're down there, don't forget to check out my guaranteed medical school acceptance mentoring, as well as the free MCAT tracker. I am so proud of you. For those who have stayed focused on this video and not distracted by other things, you are already on the right track to achieving your dream score. I already know not many people have made it this far, but you have. Thank you for listening to me yap. Okay, see you later.